You know that over here at Top 5 Scary Videos, we love nothing more than to sit around a digital campfire and spin a creepy yarn outlining the deepest, darkest, and downright dankest depths of folklore, legend, and ancient history. Well, I hope so anyway, because that's why you're all here, right? The fact of the matter is though, although horror fiction often takes us to places that encapsulate the true meaning of fear, sometimes we only need to look through the hallowed tomes of recorded legend to find just exactly what we're looking for. Creepy tales from the darker side of history, and what better place to find it than that misty old place known only as Europe. Hello horror fans, what's going on? And once again, welcome back to the scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. As per usual, I'll be your host, Jack Finch, as today we curiously take a look at the top 5 creepiest tales from European history. Roll the clip. For the curious amongst you, that clip was from 2010's Black Death, because, come on guys, there's nothing scarier than an outbreak of the bubonic plague, right? Yeah. I don't think so. Also though, it's a fairly decent movie and there's nothing quite like a medieval Sean Bean death scene. Rest in peace, Ned. The North remembers. Anyway, sorry about that. That's enough nostalgia. Kicking off at number 5, the exploding heads of Herculaneum. It's no best kept secret that the infamous ancient disaster of Pompeii is a thought already horrifying enough and a very real human fear that we all cling on to in the modern age. But when ancient Italy's cataclysmic Mount Vesuvius blew its lid and rained magma and clouds of noxious smog that blotted out the sun, little did the poor people of Pompeii know that they were the lucky ones, and a much more horrifying fate was waiting around the corner for their nearby neighbours of Herculaneum. We all know that back in 79 AD, when the gigantic Mount Vesuvius became one of the most deadly geological eruptions in European history, the subsequent ashfall buried the Roman city in volcanic debris, perfectly preserving the ancient city and nearly 20,000 of its inhabitants for over the next millennium and a half. However, at the nearby site of Herculaneum, which lay in closer proximity to the nearby volcano, the unassuming inhabitants were hit by what is known as a superheated pyroclasm, spewed forth by burning fiery flows of rock, mud, and gas. In other words, the people of Herculaneum were hit by a supercharged cloud of gas that had reached the temperature of nearly 1000 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if you didn't know, the human skull is loaded with a multitude of liquids, and if you heat that up super quickly, as in the few seconds it took for Vesuvius to unleash its hellfire, well, yeah. Unfortunately, heads tend to explode. Archaeological evidence has shown that in less than 0.2 of a second, skin vaporized, brains boiled, and skulls just exploded. Yeah, ancient history, guys. I told you it was horrifying. Next up at number 4, Lofter the Sorcerer. Old Norse is an incredibly rich and captivating tapestry of equal parts grim tales and equal parts heroic deeds, and the Viking ways still serve as a benchmark of sorts for oral tradition and folklore. Well, historically, no one clung harder to the old ways than the settlers of Iceland, thought to have been populated by Norse traditionalists sometime between 870 and 874. After that, Iceland gradually became a strange blend of Old Norse mysticism and monastic tradition, and no one encapsulated that more than the legendary figure Lofter the Sorcerer. Little is known about him, but the few documented folk legends that mention his deeds always point to 2 very interesting magical books. You see, Lofter was a monk, but in secret he practiced sorcery from a spell book that had been gifted, known as the Grasskinner, the Greyskin book. And yes, it was said to be made from human skin. Through this tome, Lofter perfected the art of black magic, covertly weaving the ancient ways while hiding under the guise of Christianity. But eventually his thirst for knowledge had reached its peak. He had heard of another much more powerful book, the Rodskinner, the Redskin book, but unfortunately for Lofter, it had been buried with his author, Gotskald Nicholson, who died in 1520 as the Bishop of Hola. That didn't seem to be a problem for Lofter though, and through his Grasskinner, he orchestrated a ritual to raise the bishop from the dead. And where did he choose to do that? In the church that he was buried, of course. As the folk legend goes, Lofter was successful in raising the bishop through a blend of Catholic psalms and black magic chants. But when he finally made his way onto this mortal plane, Lofter was so damn terrified of what he saw that he decided to call it a day, and he mysteriously died a few days later. It is thought to be the most prolific account of black magic in Iceland, yet one rarely acknowledged in history. Swinging in at number 3, the Murderous La Costa. And much like our first entry, we're heading back to ancient Rome for this one, with one of the most well-documented careers of assassination and espionage in European history, with the legend of La Costa, the legendary poisoner of the Roman Empire. The height of her murderous career was thought to be throughout the 1st century, where she gradually garnered the favour of Emperor Nero himself, who utilised her in his infamous reign of political deceit and espionage. You know, before the whole thing came burning to the ground. Nero is a benchmark for authoritarian corruption, and La Costa definitely served to exemplify that. She was thought to have been born in Celtic Gaul, which now makes up the majority of modern France, before she came into service as a poison expert under Empress Agrippina the Younger sometime in 54 AD. You see, the Empress needed her husband, Emperor Claudius, poisoned because, come on, this was ancient Rome, and La Costa proved her worth with a deadly dose of poisoned mushroom and then a poisoned feather down the throat to seal the deal. While once Agrippina's son Nero came into power, he realised that he could make good use out of a capable poisoner, and so began La Costa's 15-year reign of poison-based mass murder. In fact, La Costa was so useful to Nero that she was gifted acres upon acres of land that she then used to turn to a school for poison-based murder. La Costa pretty much set up a school for assassins that students flocked to from all over the Roman Empire. It didn't last too long though, because once pretty much everyone got sick and tired of Nero and chased him out of town, La Costa was left holding all the poison but not a drop to drink, and she was led through the city in chains and then executed for a murderous reign. It just goes to show that there's always a bigger fish, or the fish is always poisoned. Wait, which one was it again? Coming in at number 2, corpse medicine, which would make a great heavy metal band name, wouldn't it? But that's by the by, because did you know that Europeans had been eating corpses for medicinal purposes all the way up into the early 20th century? Well, I say Europeans, but I don't mean to tar everyone with the same brush, because what I really mean is the European aristocracy, because, you know, I guess corpses were expensive. The fact of the matter is though, historians have fervently highlighted the hypocrisy of Europeans who viewed tribal cannibalism as a primal taboo, when really documented cases of consuming parts of dead people to stave off illness and infection were more popular than the pox. It all started with ancient Egyptian mummies, where European doctors had hit a fever pitch in grinding up mummy parts into tinctures to be ingested that were thought to stop internal bleeding. The skull was a highly coveted prize too, and was thought to be a common cure for headaches, ground up and dosed in its powdered form. In fact, King Charles II was a huge fan, and he even created his own mixture that he referred to as the King's Drops, human skull powder mixed up with alcohol. Sounds great. However, Egyptian mummies were only a newfound fad, and actually Europeans had been already consuming fresher body parts for at least a century beforehand. The renowned German-Swiss physician Paracelsus believed that drinking blood would cure pretty much any ailment, and even suggested consuming it from a living person, if not freshly dead. He would encourage his patients to attend executions and pay a small fee for a cup of still warm blood from the recently departed. That's just rubbing salt in the wound, isn't it? And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, Giles de Rais. When you hear the tale of the legendary Joan of Arc, you think of the gallant female warrior that stirred France from the edge of ruin, only to be burned at the stake by the English, and then later posthumously pardoned by the Pope and turned into a martyr and a subsequent symbol of French resilience. But what the epic tale often fails to depict is that she was best friends with one of the most grotesque mass murderers of children in European history. This absolute villain, Giles de Rais, a French lord and knight who was thought to have murdered over 140 young boys between 1432 and 1440, although records of the number being much higher are also found. Also known as Baron de Rais, this guy rose through the ranks of the French aristocracy, marking his way as an incredibly competent military mind, and eventually partnering up with Joan of Arc as her companion in arms and commander of the French royal army that fought against the English and the Burgundian allies during the 100 Years' War, where he was later appointed the Marshal of the whole of France. After he retired from military life though, Giles began an 8-year campaign of ritualistic child murders at his many castles across the Kingdom of France. It was initially thought that Baron de Rais was using the children in a series of ritualistic practices, sacrificing them in an effort toward demonic rites, after he had pretty much depleted all of his wealth after spending on a crappy theatrical play about his exploits during the siege of Orleans. Gradually though, during the trial of Giles de Rais, it became clear that his thirst for murder murder was the only true demonic occurrence, and the vile, gruesome tales of his unspeakable exploits quickly travelled across French aristocracy, and all mention of his name was besmirched for the rest of history, and rightly so. After his trial, Gilles de Rais was executed at a public hanging, and I guess that's the end of that. Good riddance. Well, on that horrifying note, there we have it, horror fans, our list for the top 5 creepiest tales from European history. What do you guys think? Why don't you let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Before we depart from today's video though, let's take a look at some of your more resounding remarks from over the past few days. First up, Jimmy Key says, history can be ever more terrifying than fiction. Yeah, damn straight, Jimmy Key. I hope that this list has also highlighted that statement too. Kind of working together. And finally, in reference to our top 5 scariest archaeological discoveries video, Well Alright then says, as for the mass execution in Athens, it may have been due to the plague during the Peloponnesian War. Woo! Wow. Cheers for the insight, buddy. I didn't know that. I'm gonna go and binge some records of the Peloponnesian War right now, because I'm afraid I don't know enough on it to make a productive statement. That's the thing about history, isn't it? Just when you've got a grasp of it, poof, curveball. New information. Well, on that note, horror fans, unfortunately that's all we've got time for in today's video. Cheers for sticking around all the way until the end. If you're a fan of this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button as well as that subscribe bell, and we'll be seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host, Jack Finch. You've been watching top 5 scary videos, and until next time, you take it easy.